Welcome everyone to Top Prime Rankings channel. Our journey begins in the early 60s, a time of optimism and confidence for the United States. The Vietnam War was a distant thunderstorm, a conflict brewing halfway across the globe. The US, with its might and power, felt it could bring the storm under control. But little did they know, they were about to face their darkest hour. In the dense jungles of Vietnam, a force was gathering, a force that would come to be known as the Vietcong. Born out of resistance and forged in the fires of guerrilla warfare, the Vietcong were a formidable foe. The US forces, initially confident, soon found themselves in a living nightmare. The Vietnam War was not just a clash of ideologies or a test of might. It was a brutal, daunting battleground where the rules of engagement were often discarded. As the war progressed, the US soldiers would face unimaginable atrocities at the hands of the Vietcong. The brutality of war is a known fact, yet the unspeakable acts committed by the Vietcong were beyond comprehension. The Vietcong's methods of psychological warfare were particularly distressing. In an effort to break the spirit of US soldiers, they would often use tactics that seemed straight out of a horror story. For instance, they would force prisoners to listen to the agonizing screams of their fellow soldiers undergoing torture, amplifying their own fear and helplessness. The echoes of these screams, punctuating the eerie silence of the night, were designed to instill terror and break the will of even the bravest of soldiers. The physical torture inflicted by the Vietcong was equally, if not more, horrifying. US prisoners were subjected to a variety of torturous methods, including waterboarding, electric shocks, and beatings. But perhaps the most gruesome of these was the tiger cage. Prisoners were crammed into these tiny, coffin-like cages, barely large enough for a man to fit. The cages were then left out in the open, exposed to the elements, with prisoners inside enduring the unbearable heat of the day and the biting cold of the night. Survivors recount these harrowing experiences with a chilling clarity. One survivor recalls, "The pain was unbearable, but the mental anguish was worse. The uncertainty, the fear of what was to come next, it was a living nightmare." Another says, "I still wake up in cold sweats, the echoes of the screams and the clanging of the cage bars still ringing in my ears." These horrifying acts of brutality were a stark contrast to the rules of engagement and respect for human rights the US soldiers were trained to uphold. The war was not just a physical battle, but a psychological one. The Vietcong's tactics were designed not just to harm, but to break the spirit, to shatter the mind, and to leave scars that would last long after the war was over. And so, the brutality of war was not just in the violence, but in the dehumanizing, soul-crushing acts that pushed the boundaries of human cruelty. The unspeakable acts committed by the Vietcong were not just acts of war, but acts of terror, leaving a lasting, haunting legacy. The scars of the war were not only physical, but also deeply psychological. This war was not one that ended when the soldiers returned home. It continued to live on in their minds, casting a dark shadow over their lives. Post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD, became a common diagnosis among veterans. These brave men and women were plagued by nightmares and flashbacks of the horrors they had witnessed. The sounds of gunfire and screams became their constant companions, making peaceful existence a distant dream. Survivors' guilt added another layer to their suffering. Many questioned why they had been spared when their comrades had not. This guilt often led to self-isolation and deep depression, further exacerbating their mental health issues. Moreover, the long-term effects of this psychological trauma had a profound impact on their everyday lives. Relationships were strained, careers were derailed, and many found it impossible to lead a normal life. These haunting experiences left an indelible mark on the survivors, a painful reminder of the horrors they had endured. The unspeakable acts committed by the Vietcong during the Vietnam War are a dark chapter in human history. They underscore the brutal reality of conflict and serve as a stark reminder of the depths to which humanity can descend when stripped of empathy and understanding. The scars of these atrocities remain, etched into the hearts and minds of those who survived, and echoed in the tales passed down through generations. These stories, as harrowing as they may be, are crucial for us to remember as they teach us lessons about the value of peace, the importance of diplomacy, and the dire consequences of dehumanization. They remind us of our collective responsibility to prevent such horrors from ever recurring. History, with its painful chapters, is our greatest teacher. It equips us with the wisdom to choose a better path, to foster understanding, and to uphold the sanctity of human life. Thank you for joining us today on Top Prime Rankings channel. If you found this video informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, remember, history is our greatest teacher.